Chapter 22. Kaboom! Suddenly, lightning flashed, thunder crashed, and the rain came a-tumbling down. "That's why," said George. As the first few drops of rain hit Captain Underpants' pudgy face, he began to transform. In a matter of seconds, he changed from a confident, powerful superhero into an angry, annoyed elementary school principal. Unlike Wisely, the rain on the facing was having the opposite effect on nice Mr. Krupp, transforming him once again into an arrogant, foul-tempered supervillain named Captain Blunderpants. Evil George and Evil Harold smiled their evilest smiles as Captain Blunderpants snapped their ropes and yelled out a triumphant "La la tra!" George and Harold quickly snapped their fingers again and again, but it was having no effect. It was raining too hard, and Mr. Krupp was getting annoyed. "This is the dumbest dream I've ever had!" he shouted. "I'm gonna go home and get back into bed!" And with that, he turned and stormed off toward a soggy toilet paper-covered house. "Looks like the tables have turned," Evil Harold snickered. "You guys haven't won yet," said George. Quickly, George and Harold leaped onto Crackers' back, and the three forlorn friends flew off toward the treehouse. "Don't just stand there!" cried Evil Harold to his creepy cohorts. "Let's get him!" Chapter 23. 2 minutes later, back in George's yard, our heroes searched furiously through their treehouse. "I found it!" cried George. "The Shrinky Pig 2000! All we have to do is shrink those evil losers and we'll save the world!" "Too late!" shouted Captain Blunderpants as he grabbed George and Harold by their shirt collars. "We'll take that, Shrinky Singy," said Evil Harold as the contraption slipped out of George's arms. "I'm not sure how it works, but once I figure it out, I can think of about 1,000,009 evil things to do with it." Captain Blunderpants held George and Harold high in the air and snarled viciously. "Prepare to be pulverized!" he shouted. "We're doomed!" screamed Harold. "Now wait just a pickle-pickin' minute, young fella!" shouted a familiar-sounding voice from inside George's house. Chapter 24. Nobody messes with our grandbabies. Harold's grandpa and George's great-grandma stepped out onto the back patio and confronted a big bully, Captain Blunderpants. "You put those babies down or you'll get the whooping of your lifetime," said George's great-grandma. Captain Blunderpants laughed haughtily. "We're not going to warn you again, Skippy," said Harold's grandpa. Captain Underpants continued to tighten his grip on George and Harold. So the two octogenarians joined hands, gazed fiercely into each other's eyes, and shouted, "Gazer powers, activate!" Quickly, they began spinning around and around. Faster and faster, the old folks twirled until a tornado formed around them, tearing away their clothes and jewelry, and sending patio furniture flying violently. Suddenly, the twirling stopped, the tornado subsided, and the elderly twosome stood proudly in their underwear, huffing, puffing, and fearlessly facing their foe. "Oh, that was fun! Let's do it again, Henry," said George's great-grandma. "Heh, laughed Harold's grandpa. "All right, my dear, but we've got to teach that silly Willie a lesson first." "Oh, yeah," said George's great-grandma. "That young fella's got a hankering for spankering." Harold's grandpa grabbed a couple of curtains from the kitchen window and tied them around their necks. "Not too tight, Henry," said George's great-grandma. With their capes in place, George and Harold's super-grandparents approached Captain Blunderpants triumphantly. "All right, Sonny," said Harold's grandpa. "Prepare to get your bucket whooped by Boxer Boy and Great Granny Girdle." Chapter 25. The Incredibly Graphic Violence Chapter Part 2 in Flip-O-Rama. TM. Flip-O-Rama 3, pages 143 and 145. Remember, flip only page 143. While you are flipping, be sure you can see the picture on page 143 and the one on page 145. If you flip quickly, the two pictures will start to look like one animated picture. Don't forget to add your own sound effects. The Geriatric Jawbreaker. Flip-O-Rama 4, pages 147 and 149. Remember, flip only page 147. While you are flipping, be sure you can see the picture on page 147 and the one on page 149. If you flip quickly, the two pictures will start to look like one animated picture. Don't forget to add your own sound effects. Cane the Brain. Flip-O-Rama 5, pages 151 and 153. Remember, flip only page 151. While you are flipping, be sure you can see the picture on page 151 and the one on page 153. If you flip quickly, the two pictures will start to look like one animated picture. Don't forget to add your own sound effects. Take a walk around the wild side. Chapter 26, Shrinky-Dorks. You know, said George, I think I just figured out what happened to the superpowers that disappeared earlier. Oh yeah, said Evil George. But you didn't figure this out. All we have to do is press one button on the shrinking machine and you'll all be transformed into tiny little shrimps. Go ahead and press the button, laughed Harold. You're holding it backwards anyway. You'll just shrink yourselves. Really? Said Evil Harold. Gee, thanks. He turned the Shrinky-Pictosaurus around and pressed the button. Zap! And then they were shrunk to the size of potato chips. Hey! Shouted Mini Evil George. What happened? Oops, said Harold. I guess I made a mistake. You actually were holding it right the first time. My bad. You know, said George, I think I know two little boys who could really use a good spanking. Chapter 27, The Incredibly Graphic Violence Chapter, Part 3 in Flip-O-Rama TM. Well, folks, you know what to do, and you know how to do it. Left hand here. Happy Spanksgiving. Chapter 28, Wrapping Things Up. Well, it looks like our job here is done, said Boxer Boy. Yes, it is, my big strong man, said Great Granny Girdle, giggling gleefully. George and Harold looked at each other in horror. You know, little lady, said Boxer Boy, somewhere out there is an all-you-can-eat buffet with a senior citizens early bird special just going to waste. Well, let's go find it, you big hook of love, said Great Granny Girdle as she kissed him passionately on his wobbly neck fat. The scene that followed could best be described as the drooliest 5-minute kiss in the history of children's books. Dentures sloshed, wrinkles flapped, and rubbery jowls squished, smooshed, and quivered gelatinously. Said Harold. I think I need to go wash my eyeballs. Me too, said George. And as the arthritic Avengers flew off into the sunset, George and Harold decided to try very, very hard not to think about the disgusting event they had just witnessed. Come on, we've got to wrap this story up, said George. First, we need to dehypnotize and shrink Sulu. Then we've got to go back into that crazy Purple Potty and return these bozos to their alternate universe, said Harold. Chapter 29. To make a long story short, zap. Chapter 30. To make a longer story even shorter, kick. Chapter 31. The chapter where nothing bad happens. Gee, that worked out pretty good, said Harold. Sulu is now back to its normal size and personality, and the Purple Potty people are back in their own reality where they won't be able to bother us ever again. I guess everything worked out perfectly. Yeah, nice going, said George, looking a bit annoyed. Why do you have to say things like that? Things like what? Asked Harold. Haven't you been paying attention in these stories? Asked George. Every time somebody says something like that, it always means that a bunch of bad stuff's just about to happen. But what could possibly go wrong now? Asked Harold. Freeze! Shouted the chief of police. You guys are under arrest for robbing Frank's bank. Looks like you're going to jail for the rest of your lives. See what I mean? Said George. You've got to stop saying stuff like that. I guess you're right, said Harold. But at least things can't get any worse. Shouted George. You did it again! Now I bet when you turn the page, something even worse is going to happen. You've got to learn to keep your mouth shut at the end of these books. Yeah, but what could be worse than going to jail for the rest of our lives? Chapter 32. The thing that could be worse than going to jail for the rest of their lives. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a ball of blue lightning appeared, growing bigger and bigger until it exploded in a blinding flash. And there, standing where the ball of lightning had been, was a smoking pair of giant robotic pants. This can't be good, said George. A small opening at the front of the robot pants began to unzip, and out of that opening peeked a fearsomely familiar face. Hey, it's Professor Poopy Pants! Shouted Harold. The cop started to laugh. Stop laughing! Shouted the little man, peeking out the giant zipper. My name is no longer Professor Poopy Pants. I changed it into Tippy Tinkle Trousers! The cops laughed even harder. And I've got a special surprise for anybody who thinks my new name is funny, said the furious professor. Immediately, the metallic pants opened up at the top, and a giant laser shooter rose from its robotic depths. A brilliant burst of energy zapped the laughing cops, and suddenly they were both transformed into frozen statues. My Freezy Beam 4000 will take care of anybody who stands in my way, said Tippy. And now, he said with a wicked smile, it's time for my revenge! Oh no! Screamed Harold. Here we go again! Screamed George. About the Author-Illustrator. When Dave Pilkey was a kid, he was diagnosed with ADHD and dyslexia. Dave was so disruptive in class that his teachers made him sit out in the hallway every day. Luckily, Dave loved to draw and make up stories. He spent his time in the hallway creating his own original comic books, the very first adventures of Dogman and Captain Underpants. In college, Dave met a teacher who encouraged him to illustrate and write. He won a national competition in 1986, and the prize was the publication of his first book, World War I. He made many other books before being awarded the 1998 California Young Reader Medal for Dog Breath, which was published in 1994, and in 1997, he won the Caldecott honor for The Paperboy. The Adventures of Super Diaper Baby, published in 2002, was the first complete graphic novel spin-off from the Captain Underpants series and appeared at number 6 on the USA Today bestseller list for all books, both adult and children's, and was also a New York Times bestseller. It was followed by The Adventures of Ook and Gluck, Kung Fu Caveman from the Future, and Super Diaper Baby 2, The Invasion of the Potty Snatchers, both USA Today bestsellers. The unconventional style of these graphic novels is intended to encourage uninhibited creativity in kids. His stories are semi-autobiographical and explore universal themes that celebrate friendship, tolerance, and the triumph of the good-hearted. Dave loves to kayak in the Pacific Northwest with his wife. Double trouble! George and Harold's time-traveling Purple Potty has landed them in a strange, backward universe. The Purple Potty people, Evil George, Evil Harold, and Captain Blunderpants, are on a mission to take over our world, and nothing's going to stand in their way. Can George and Harold handle this mess on their own, or will they need Captain Underpants to swoop in and save the day? Featuring Flip-O-Rama, the world-famous cheesy animation technique that lets you animate the action. Have you read your underpants today? Pilkey.com. Scholastic, planetpilkey.com. $9.99 US, $12.99 CAN. ISBN 978-1-338-27151-5, 50999, 978-1338-271-515.